It was a high-end event, full of expensive suits, polished shoes, and sparkling jewelry. The rich and powerful gathered to show off their latest accomplishments. Among the crowd was a man in his early 30s, well-dressed and exuding confidence. He was everything that most people admired, wealthy, influential, and admired in his circles. Let's call him Jack. Jack stood near the bar, chatting casually with a few business partners. He didn't look at anyone who wasn't of some importance to him. That's when he saw her. A woman, standing near the edge of the room, looking out of place. She wasn't dressed in designer clothes like the others. Her clothes were simple, her smile genuine, and her presence unassuming. Her name was Lily. She was here because of a friend who had invited her. She didn't fit the usual crowd, but she wasn't uncomfortable. She had worked hard for this moment, this rare opportunity to step into a world of wealth and success, even if it was just for an evening. Jack noticed her and, intrigued by her humble charm, decided to approach. "You don't seem like you belong here," he said, a slight smirk on his face. Lily looked at him, confused but not offended. She explained that she was a guest of a friend, just trying to enjoy the night, but Jack wasn't listening. His eyes scanned her attire and posture, quickly dismissing her as someone who didn't match the status of the event. "It's not often I see someone so out of place," he said. He wasn't trying to be mean, but it stung. Lily forced a smile, feeling the sting of judgment. She excused herself, slipping away, her heart heavy with the weight of his words. Lily left the event that night with her head held low. The encounter with Jack had stung more than she cared to admit. But deep down, she knew she was better than the way he had treated her. She wasn't just some girl in a cheap dress, she had dreams, and she had the drive to make them come true. The rejection fueled something inside her. It wasn't anger, it was determination. She was tired of being overlooked. She couldn't change how others saw her, but she could change her own future. Lily didn't have the luxury of relying on anyone else. Her family struggled, and she had to work hard just to get by. She took up odd jobs, waitressing, cleaning, anything that could help her pay the bills. But she wasn't going to stop there. She knew she needed more than just a paycheck. She needed to invest in herself. She enrolled in night classes at a local community college, studying business and marketing. The hours were long, and the work was exhausting, but it didn't matter. Every minute spent learning felt like another step toward the life she dreamed of. Slowly, she began to build her own skills, piece by piece, every lesson reinforcing her belief that she could make it on her own. It wasn't easy. There were times when she wanted to quit, when the weight of the world felt too heavy. But Lily refused to give up. She saved up a little money, bought a small laptop, and started working on her own idea, a business that would help other small business owners like herself. Months passed, and she began to gain a small but loyal following. She worked tirelessly to improve her brand, creating content and offering services that made a difference. She didn't care that it wasn't glamorous or that she didn't have the same connections as the people in those high-end parties. All she needed was determination and a belief in herself. Step by step, her business grew. She started making enough money to hire a few people, and with each new success, the world around her began to shift. What had once seemed impossible was now a reality. She wasn't just surviving, she was thriving. While Lily worked tirelessly to build her life from the ground up, Jack's life continued in a very different direction. He had everything a man could want: money, status, and power. His business ventures were thriving, and the world seemed to bend to his will. It was a life many people envied, and Jack made sure everyone knew it. He continued to attend events like the one where he met Lily, but the faces and names no longer mattered to him. What mattered was expanding his empire. He signed deals, made investments, and added to his wealth, never really thinking about anything beyond the next big step. Jack's arrogance grew along with his success. He had surrounded himself with people who flattered him, agreeing with everything he said and doing whatever he asked. The more money he made, the more isolated he became. There were few people left who challenged him, and fewer still who made him think twice about his choices. Despite his growing wealth, something was missing. There was no real connection with anyone, no real challenge to his authority. But Jack didn't seem to notice. He focused on his work, telling himself that success was all that mattered. He kept moving forward, constantly in search of the next opportunity to prove he was better than everyone else. In his world, it was easy to forget about people like Lily, those who struggled, who worked hard just to survive. To him, they were simply part of the background, invisible in the world he had built. But as Jack's success continued, there was an undercurrent of loneliness he couldn't shake. His lavish lifestyle, the expensive cars, the penthouse apartment, it all felt like a facade. He found himself more and more disconnected from real life. But he never slowed down long enough to ask himself why. For years, Jack lived in this bubble of wealth and pride, never questioning his choices or the people he had left behind. It wasn't until much later that the world outside his bubble would come crashing back into his life, reminding him of everything he had once dismissed. Years had passed, and Jack's business had reached unimaginable heights. He had everything he'd ever wanted: the luxury, the power, the recognition. But somewhere deep inside, there was a sense of emptiness he couldn't ignore. He kept pushing forward, thinking that if he just achieved more, the feeling would go away. One evening, Jack was at home in his penthouse, sitting in front of the TV after a long day of meetings. The lights of the city flickered outside his window, and the soft hum of his expensive appliances filled the air. As he flipped through channels absent-mindedly, something caught his attention. A familiar name flashed across the screen. Lily. At first, he thought he must be mistaken. After all, it had been years since that night at the party, and he barely remembered her face now. But as the camera zoomed in on her, something in him shifted. There she was, Lily, standing confidently on stage at a conference. Her once humble attire had been replaced by a sleek, professional outfit, and she was speaking with such poise and authority that Jack found himself drawn in. She was being interviewed by a well-known journalist, talking about her rise from the bottom to becoming a successful entrepreneur. Jack couldn't believe what he was hearing. This woman, the one he had brushed aside so many years ago, had built an empire of her own. She was no longer the shy, underappreciated girl at the party. She had grown into someone powerful, someone to be reckoned with. He sat there, frozen in his seat, as he listened to her story. She spoke about her struggles, her drive, and her commitment to helping others who were in situations like the one she had once been in. She wasn't just successful for herself, she was using her platform to lift others up. The more Jack watched, the more he realized how wrong he had been. He had dismissed her without a second thought, assuming she didn't belong in his world. But now, watching her on TV, he could see how far she had come. She had achieved something that he had never thought possible. Jack felt a strange mix of emotions. There was admiration, certainly, but also regret. How could he have been so blind to her potential? The woman he had rejected was now a force to be reckoned with, and he was left with nothing but a painful reminder of his mistake. The interview ended, but Jack couldn't stop thinking about it. He rewound the footage, watching it over and over. He was torn between wanting to reach out to her, apologize, and just disappearing from the memory of her life altogether. But one thing was clear. His world had just collided with hers in a way he hadn't expected, and it was a moment he would never forget. The TV screen flickered off, but Jack sat there, in the dim light of his penthouse, lost in thought. He hadn't expected to see Lily on TV, much less hear her story. The confidence she exuded was in stark contrast to the nervous girl he had met years ago. He couldn't believe how much she had achieved, and how little he had truly seen in her back then. Jack felt an unexpected weight in his chest. The pride that had once been so central to his life now felt hollow. He had built his empire, but at what cost? He had never truly valued the people around him, dismissing them based on their status or background. And now, Lily, the one he had thought so little of, was living a life that made his seem meaningless in comparison. For the first time in years, Jack questioned his choices. He had spent so much time chasing wealth, power, and admiration from the people who mattered to him. But in doing so, he had isolated himself from what really mattered, the kind of genuine, hard-earned success that Lily had built. She had come from nothing, worked for everything, and used her success to make a difference in the world. He couldn't help but feel a deep sense of regret for the way he had dismissed her. How had he been so blind? In that brief interaction at the party, he had judged her based on her clothes, her background, her perceived status. He had thought she was beneath him, nothing more than a face in a crowd. But now, seeing her on that stage, he realized how wrong he had been. Jack thought about reaching out to her, maybe an apology, or at the very least, an acknowledgement of how much she had achieved. But then he hesitated. What if she didn't want to hear from him? What if she had already moved on, leaving him behind in the past where he belonged? He couldn't help but wonder if there was any way to make amends for his actions. For now, all he could do was sit in the silence of his apartment, replaying the interview in his mind. The guilt gnawed at him, and he knew it wouldn't go away easily. He couldn't undo the past, but perhaps there was still a way forward. A way to stop judging others based on appearances and to truly see people for who they were. As the years passed, Lily's business continued to grow. Her name was now known in industries far beyond the one she had started in. She wasn't just another entrepreneur, she was a symbol of resilience, a beacon of hope for anyone who felt like they didn't belong or couldn't make it. She had faced the odds and defied them. Lily had built something extraordinary, but it wasn't just the money or recognition that mattered to her. It was the impact she was able to have on the world around her. She used her success to give back, investing in programs that helped young women and underprivileged communities. She created mentorship opportunities, helping those who, like her, had struggled to find a way forward. She became a voice for the voiceless, those who had been overlooked, dismissed, and forgotten. Her rise to success wasn't just about her. It was about lifting others up, showing them that it was possible to break free from the limitations society placed on them. She started foundations, ran workshops, and spoke at conferences, always pushing the message that anyone could achieve greatness if they were willing to work for it. Despite her busy schedule, Lily never let go of her roots. She stayed grounded, remembering the days when she had nothing, when she had to fight for every small success. That struggle had shaped her into the woman she was today. It reminded her to stay humble, to always be grateful for how far she had come. But there was no bitterness in her success. Even as she became a household name, she never sought revenge or even the chance to confront those who had once looked down on her. She knew that her story spoke for itself. She had turned rejection into motivation, and now she was changing lives. One day, she received an invitation to a major event, a conference where some of the world's top entrepreneurs would speak. The organizers made it clear that they wanted her as the keynote speaker, and they were willing to pay a generous fee for her time. Lily agreed, of course. She wasn't doing it for the money, but the chance to share her story with an even wider audience was too valuable to pass up. As she stood on stage that day, speaking to a sea of eager faces, she couldn't help but think about how far she had come. The woman who had been judged, dismissed, and rejected years ago was now inspiring others. She had turned the tables, not by seeking vengeance, but by proving that success wasn't about where you came from. It was about where you were willing to go. Jack may have rejected her once, but Lily's success was a loud reminder that no one's worth could ever truly be measured by first impressions or shallow judgments.